your proficiency scale for this test. It's going to be Friday, right? We've already taken this part. 30 points of our summative assessment for this unit comes from recalling the meaning of key terms, blah, 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 blah. That's your vocabulary stuff. Okay, so we've already done that, right? Category 2, or proficiency level 2, says categorize the characteristics of the lifestyles of early humans into the appropriate time period. So we're going to start learning about that today, and pretty much what we actually started yesterday with the apples and oranges activity. And pretty much what you're doing here is you're going to have a characteristic, and you're going to tell me whether that characteristic belongs in the Neolithic era or the Paleolithic era. So like A will be Paleolithic, B will be Neolithic, and if it says created or you learned how to harness fire, right, or to create fire, then your answer would be Paleolithic period. If it's invented agriculture, that would be Neolithic period. Okay, so that's what that one's going to be. It's pretty easy. So, third, proficiency level 3, describe the characteristics of early societies and family structures. As we learn about the makeup of Paleolithic families and societies and the makeup of Neolithic families and societies, you should see some differences in the way that they behave and act. On this one, you're going to have DBQs, several documents that you're going to have to answer questions based off of. Some of them you won't need any prior knowledge, and you'll just have to read the document and get information. Others, it's basically supposed to lead you, be clues to help you gauge your prior knowledge. Okay, just kind of depends on which one's which, but that's the third one. And the fourth one we've already spoken about. Explain how artifacts and other archaeological findings provide evidence of the nature and movement of prehistoric groups of people. On that one, that is your 20-point, 8 to 10 sentences essay type answer. We're going to talk more about that tomorrow before the end of class so that you guys are prepared for that. Any questions about our proficiency scale or what's going to be on the test? All right. So that's what we're focused on today. We're focusing on the daily objective. It's written up there. And it says, I can explain the movements and lifestyles of early humans. So you guys want to be able to tell me how these early people lived. And a little bit, you don't have to tell me, but we should be able to after today, how they moved too. How do they interact or with their environment? Where'd they go? Okay. So the whole idea here is that we are going from cavemen to metropolitan. Okay. So what that means is we're going to go from these Paleolithic type humans to modern day humans. Metropolitan is a word that means city-like or having something to do with a city. Okay. So think barbarian living in a cave all the way to urban and sleek and sophisticated. How do we go from this, right, to this right here? Okay, that's what we're focused on. Now, this begins obviously in the Paleolithic period. Paleolithic is Greek, and you guys do need to write this down. Paleolithic is Greek for old stone. It is known as the Stone Age, and this whole time period that we're going to be talking about, Paleolithic and Neolithic, Unit 1 is all about the Stone Age. Okay, so it says right here it's known as the Stone Age, but this is not just talking about the Paleolithic period. Both of the lithics, Paleo and Neo, are going to be Stone Ages. But this is the older part of the Stone Age, the part that the very beginning of humanity really. And during this time, we're going to begin to use stone to create tools and stone to hunt animals and stone to just basically any kind of advantage that we can get from it. This is when this occurs. This begins 2.5 million years ago and ends in 8000 BC. The date of when the Paleolithic period begins is debatable. Now, you have to understand that 2.5 million years ago does not mark the beginning of humanity. For scientists and people who basically believe this and teach, and a scientific explanation for this is that 2.5 million years ago marks the beginning of human ancestors. Okay, so a very long time ago, our ancestors began to emerge. The first people, the first humans, when we somewhere arrive in this during the Paleolithic period, are nomadic, which means they move from place to place to search and find food, mainly following the migration patterns of large game, meaning big animals that we can hunt and eat and feed our families and the large group that we are traveling with. Okay, you do not have to write this down. It's just we have to talk about it to understand what's going on here. The first humans, according to scientists, show up in Eastern Africa around 130,000 years ago and begin populating the planet. Now, this version of humanity is not the same version of humanity that we are today. Okay, today we are Homo sapiens. This would probably not even be a Homo sapien, something before that. Okay, and I know some of you guys didn't finish taking notes on that first page. We'll come back. We'll make sure you get it. Okay. But we migrate out of East Africa and we begin to migrate in the planet. We've got a picture of that right here. You can see we go from East Africa. We start to populate Europe, populate China, Southeastern Asia, South Asia, and then we even migrate over the Bering Land Bridge here into North and South America. And this is where the explanation that we need to kind of talk about is how do we get into where we live today? Where do the Native Americans come from? The people that first lived on North and South America. And one of the explanations, again, you don't have to write this down, one of the explanations for that is the land bridge that occurred during the Ice Age, the Bering Land Strait. Now, before we talk about it, it is important to understand there's other theories as well. Some historians think that the first Native Americans arrived on boats. They traveled and kind of hopped over island to island across the Pacific Ocean. But one of the explanations that I think is really interesting is this: the Bering Land Strait. Because of the frigid temperatures of the Ice Age, humans were able to cross over a frozen land bridge that connected North and South America. Okay, that's not supposed to say that. It's supposed to be connected Asia and North America. Okay, I need to change that. We've got a picture of that right here. Here is Beringia. This is Siberia, which is northeastern Russia. And this is a state that you should be familiar with, Alaska. Notice there's water in between these two places now. So at one point during human history, this was frozen. And the reason why it was frozen is because of the Ice Age. The Earth, for whatever reason, tilts more on its axis around 14,000 BC, somewhere around there. I'm not getting that date right, I'm sure. But for whatever reason, the Earth tilts on its axis, and it makes the northern hemisphere, this area, much colder than it previously was. Because of that, if I circle the Arctic Circle today, it would be something like this. Okay, that's where the Arctic Circle would be. But because the temperatures of the Earth get cooler, then that ice begins to extend all the way down into parts of Europe and even parts of our country today. Modern day Ohio is one of the places that are marked by this glacial advance. So for me, this didn't make a lot of sense when I was younger. So I want to explain it to you guys so that you kind of understand what's going on. I always heard the word glacier, didn't know what it was. A glacier is just a large sheet of ice, frozen water. Okay, if we go to the polar ice cap of the very top up here, the North Pole, up there where Santa Claus lives, you're going to see that it is a giant glacier. It's one big giant sheet of ice, right? But when you hear that word glacier, we're usually associating with a large sheet of ice that is moving. Okay, these glaciers don't move very fast. They move very slow. In fact, inches per year. It's not like you see it move real fast. So this glacial advance would have taken over for a period of thousands of years. But the reason why this is so important to us is people that are living here during the Paleolithic age, the temperatures are going to change. And you can imagine how that would change their lives, right? They're going to have to figure out new ways to survive because it's going to be much colder than it was before. And we're going to talk more about that. One of those ways is the domestication of animals. They begin to domesticate wolves. Okay, we'll talk about that. But Prior to that, and for thousands of years, this is the lifestyle that humans are going to live, the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. So I want you to write that down. So, in the hunter-gatherer society, men are going to spend their days hunting wild game. Again, large animals, animals like bison, buffalo, goats, reindeer. And we are naturally expert hunters. We're really good at this. We're able to use different tools and our instincts to hunt down these animals. In fact, some historians think so good that we actually drive our food source out of extinction, and that may be one of the reasons why that we begin to farm. That is not proven, that's just one of the ideas. When we hunt these animals, we're going to use every single part of them. We're going to use their bones to make tools. We're going to use their skins to make clothes. We're even going to use their fats to create different types of paints to put on the walls of caves. And of course, we're going to use the meat for sustenance. That's going to be the majority of our diet. It's going to be a protein, heavy protein-based diet, mainly from these animals that we are hunting. The way that this happens is groups of 20 to 30 expert trackers are going to go out on a hunt, so a large amount of people. They're going to use, at first, in the older part of the Paleolithic period, clubs and maybe even their bare hands to beat animals to death, or even chase them off of cliffs, okay, by scaring them, hurting, basically outnumbering a group of animals and then scaring them off of a cliff or into other bad situations. And later on, in the later part of the Stone Age, we're going to be able to create tools that are going to help us with this. Spears, knives, things like that. Women, their role in the society is going to be to stay near the camp and gather fruits and nuts. Okay, so that's the main job. Notice the gender roles here in this society are different. Men have roles, women have roles. However, if we look down here at the bottom, it says men and women are relatively equal. They're equal. Okay, there's nobody that's in charge of another. There's no leader. There is no government. So many historians look back on the hunter-gatherer period as proof of the human ability to live in an egalitarian society, basically where everyone is equal. Now that is also a debatable idea and a debatable opinion, but it is what they go back to and say, hey, this is proof here that we have lived equally before. Where they're going to live is under overhanging cliffs or in caves. And cold places, they may live in shelters made of ice, but basically they're going to live in temporary shelters. They're not going to build permanent shelters. There's no need for permanent shelters because they're going to move quickly from place to place. There's no private property. There's no concept of this is mine and not yours because there's no need for private property. Families are going to be relatively small as well because you're going to have to move from place to place all the time. Now, let's talk about this equality thing. what happens? Why does this change? Does it change? Does equality exist today in society? All of that stuff's up for debate. But for thousands of years, women do not have equal roles in civilized society. If you don't have to go back very far in the history of the United States to see that women don't, even in our country, very long ago, have equal roles in our society. Just 150 years ago, Abraham Lincoln, to that time. If we go back and look at the antebellum periods, what that's called in American history, we will see that women are not protected by law at all from their husbands. In fact, they are totally dependent on their husbands for protection, for basically their basic lives. So that's only 150 years ago, not even 150 years ago in our own country, right? So what happens? Where does this go wrong? Where do we go wrong here? And how do we get to the point where men and women don't have equal roles in society? We're going to talk about that later on once we get to the Neolithic period. Now, the Paleolithic period. These are the tools that we're going to see used during the Paleolithic period. Notice the lower Paleolithic, that's going to be the older portion. These are not very advanced tools, right? This one's called a chopper, a pebble, roughly worked on one side, used for digging and skinning. So if you can, those of you, any hunters in here? Anybody ever been hunting? Everybody skinned a deer before? Okay, well you can probably imagine what that takes. Can you imagine skinning an animal with that stone right there? Probably a pretty tough task. A hand axe here, right? A knife, so not very advanced. Then we get down here and we start to see how later on in the Paleolithic period, we see finely napped blades used as spearheads, a harpoon used for fishing, a spear thrower, right? So a javelin. We're gonna throw things to animals now. Needles made of bone. So we're starting to see how we're becoming more advanced in the later part of the Paleolithic period. If we remember back to Ötzi the Iceman and his copper axe, right? That would have been an example of kind of a weapon that didn't really belong in that time period, but we just kind of example of how we're becoming advanced. Again, the woolly mammoth. This is what we're going to be hunting for, right? Obviously not just the woolly mammoth, but probably the most famous animal from the Paleolithic period is going to be the woolly mammoth. That's Manny from the movie Ice Age. Poor guy in real life would have been hunted almost into extinction. All right, fire and language. These are the innovations that are going to occur during the Paleolithic period. So the changes that we're going to make that are going to help our lives a lot and really advance humanity, change humanity into something closer to what we are today. You guys write that down. Sometime during the Paleolithic period, we're going to develop these innovations. The ability to speak. Okay, we go from making hand gestures and noises to communicate to actually speaking words. And we also discover how to make fire during the Stone Age. Obviously, these are pretty major human innovations. The way we make fire is we do that by striking flint and iron pyrite, two rocks together that sparks come from if you strike them together. We begin to harness fire, be able to use it. We can now use it for warmth, to hunt at night, and to cook our food. Okay, so imagine for a second that there was a time period, according to scientists and historians, that we did not cook our food. Okay, we ate raw food. Not really sure how that works, but they think they can go back and look at our body, and there is evidence to support their opinions, which is that we have a gallbladder and an appendix. Neither have any use today in our body, and they believe that those may have been used to basically digest raw meat in the Paleolithic period, basically before we changed. We also saw that Ötzi, the Iceman, was lactose intolerant, right? A change that occurred later on in humans is that we now can digest milk. Most early humans could not do so. Don't write this down. I just want to talk about, again, evidence of the change of humanity. Around 30,000 years ago, we have evidence of these cave paintings. Now we're seeing humans create things for the first time. No longer just surviving and roaming the earth. We are painting scenes of lions, oxen, panthers, and other animals on the walls of caves. The reason for this these cave paintings, is unknown. Some historians think maybe it was done to bring luck to hunters, to record history, or for personal enjoyment. But for whatever reason, they chose to choose things essential to their everyday life. One thing that's not depicted are humans. They don't actually paint humans. We see that in movies, we see that in TV shows a lot of times, but that's actually not the case. So it's just going to be pretty much scenes of animals or scenes of animal migrations and things like that, or handprints. The way that they made these paints is pretty remarkable. They're going to crush different types of stones together. They're going to use animal fat. They're even going to use berries, certain types of berries that we still actually make paints out of, certain types of these berries, to stain these walls permanently. So we have some pictures of what that looks like. Well, here's just a picture of what that may have looked like, an illustration of cave paintings going on. And then here, this is an actual cave painting, a 30,000-year-old human creation found in Lascaux, Spain by an 8-year-old girl who just happened to stumble across it when she was exploring a cave. This painting right here is also from Lascaux, Spain, and we see it's of animals. So just again, we see this major change in humanity as we're beginning to create things. But still, even after this period of time, thousands of years are going to pass by while we are going to be living this hunter-gatherer lifestyle before. Before this age right here, the Neolithic age, 8,000 BC. So 8,000 BC, around this time, one of the most impactful human changes is going to occur, and it is going to be farming. So I want you guys to write down this stuff. The Neolithic age, Neolithic, Paleolithic means old stone, Neolithic means new stone, and you're going to write down the time period this occurs, 8,000 BC to 4,000 BC. During this time, we begin to domesticate and farm. So we call this time period, this major shift, the agricultural revolution. It's when we stop chasing our food and we start raising our food, okay? And this may not seem like that big of a deal. Why is it a big deal that we start to farm and we're no longer hunting and gathering? Well, it's going to change the makeup of our society entirely, and it's either going to lead to physical changes in humanity that we may not have guessed. So first of all, we're going to begin. One of the changes that occur is the beginning of domesticating animals. Now, this has already been occurring in the Paleolithic period a little bit. We start to domesticate wolves and things like that, and they aid us in our ability to hunt. But now we're going to start domesticating large animals like oxen and different larger animals They're going to help us. We're going to get meat from them. We're going to get animal skins from them. The same way, the same uses that we have for our domesticated large animals today, these Neolithic people are going to use, except for milk. Remember, at first they don't use milk. Later on, they can use their milk. They now, because of this, humans now have more food and they can feed more people. This leads to population growth. The food that they're going to be growing here, the crops they're going to be growing, especially in the Middle East and where this first occurs, is going to be wheat. Wheat's going to be the first one, but eventually we're going to see crops like barley and corn. And you guys probably don't understand this, but the reason why this is so important is we can now crush those, basically the fruits, the kernels that come with wheat, crush them up into little bitty tiny pieces, and then cook them and make bread. So this is where bread comes from, right? Now we can eat bread. We can eat these crops, and it's going to lead to massive more amounts of food, and we're going to have major population growth with this. There's also going to be some negatives that come along with this. Now that animals live near our homes, you can imagine what's going to happen. We're going to get into the negatives in a minute, but animals bring something with them, okay? Now there's going to be private property. Now there's going to be people that have stuff and others who don't have stuff, okay? There's going to be people that provide and others that don't provide. So all of this is going to change the makeup of human society. But a pretty obvious change is this population growth. Population growth is going to lead to bigger settlements, which leads to cities. Cities are going to lead to things much later on like education. And education is going to lead to modern civilization, which leads to steel, cars, trains, planes, air conditioning. So you can imagine if the agricultural revolution doesn't occur, then modern civilization, modern life, the way that we do things never happens, okay? After this time period, humans are going to advance at a super high rate of speed. We're going to change rapidly. And when I say that, that's in comparison to the 40, 50,000 years that nothing changed, right? We were just hunters and gatherers. So this is a major change in human history. Some of the innovations and discoveries that are going to occur here are, we've already put it out there, systematic agriculture, basically discovering how to plant seeds and to grow food. The first leaders are going to emerge in these villages, so we're starting to see the development of government. We see the idea of private property emerging, all these things. Yes, Eva?
Yeah,
3 minutes. Good. Y'all just keep writing this stuff down. And then we begin to smooth these stone tools out. We begin to make advancements on our stone tools. Our huts and our clothing become more advanced, and we start to incorporate local materials such as grass and wood. So these are the innovations and the specific innovations and discoveries that are going to occur during this time period.